What would you do if a powerful man tried to humiliate you in a language he thought you couldn't understand? Picture this, an upscale restaurant in Boston, a mafia boss sitting at the best table, a waitress standing before him with a notepad in her trembling hand. He looks at her name tag, then at her worn-out shoes, and sneers. To Vincent Moretti, the waitress standing before him was not a person. She was entertainment, a prop in his theater of power and cruelty. He thought that by switching to rapid-fire Sicilian, an obscure dialect used by old-world mobsters, he could strip her of her dignity in front of his associates. He thought he was untouchable, that his money and reputation made him invincible. He was wrong. He did not know that the woman holding his menu was not just a waitress, and the words she was about to speak would not only silence his entire table, but unravel his criminal empire piece by piece. This is the story of how arrogance destroyed a king. What you're about to hear is going to shock you. Kindly hit the subscribe button and let me know where you are watching from. Stay with me because the final twist is something nobody could have predicted, not even the FBI. This is the story of Eleanor Rossi, and it is the story of how a brilliant woman used language as a weapon to bring down one of the most dangerous men in Boston. This story will teach you a powerful lesson. Never underestimate someone based on their uniform. Never assume silence means ignorance. And never, ever speak freely in front of someone you have dismissed as insignificant. The air inside Castello, Boston's most exclusive Italian restaurant, smelled of garlic, expensive wine, and danger. For Eleanor Rossi, however, it mostly smelled of survival. She adjusted the waistband of her black slacks, which were a size too big and held together with a safety pin hidden beneath her crisp white apron. It was 7:30 on a Saturday evening. The dinner rush was in full swing, a symphony of clinking glasses and low conversations that probably involved more money than Elena would see in her lifetime. Table 3 needs more bread. Table 6 wants the fish redone because it is too fishy. Muove faster, Rossi. Move. The command came from Gerald Pierce, the floor manager, a thin man with slicked back hair who treated the waitstaff like servants in his personal kingdom. He was currently stationed near the entrance, straightening already perfect menus and glaring at anyone who dared to breathe too loudly, as said quietly, keeping her head down. She grabbed a basket of warm focaccia from the kitchen pass, ignoring the sharp stabbing pain shooting through her right heel. She had been on her feet for 10 hours straight. Her shoes, cheap nose-lip sneakers bought from a discount store in Dorchester, were literally falling apart. The sole of the left one was separating from the canvas, held together by superglue and desperate prayer. The right shoe was not much better. The insole had worn through completely, and she could feel every crack in the tile floor with each step. Eleanor Rossi was 29 years old. To the patrons of Castello, the wealthy businessmen and politicians and old money families who dined here weekly, she was invisible. She was a shadow in black and white who refilled water glasses without being asked, cleared plates without making a sound, existed only to serve and then disappear. They did not see the exhaustion carved into her delicate features despite the careful application of drugstore concealer that she touched up in the bathroom mirror every 2 hours. They certainly did not know that 4 years ago. Elena had been a graduate student in forensic linguistics at Boston University, one of the top students in her program, fluent in 6 languages including 3 distinct Italian dialects. Destined for a prestigious career with the FBI or Interpol analyzing criminal communications and testifying in federal cases. She had been brilliant, driven, and unstoppable. Then the phone call came. Her younger brother Marco, 23 years old and full of life, working his first job out of college, had collapsed at work. The diagnosis came fast and brutal. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Aggressive. Stage 3. The oncologist, a tired woman with kind eyes, laid out the treatment options. Chemotherapy, radiation, possibly a bone marrow transplant. The prognosis was uncertain. With treatment, Marco had a 60% chance of remission. Without treatment, he had 6 months. The cost was staggering. Marco's entry-level job at a tech startup offered health insurance, but it was bare bones, high deductible. And the experimental treatments that offered the best hope were not covered at all. The numbers the hospital financial counselor showed Elena's family were incomprehensible. $30,000 every 3 months for the experimental drug cocktail. Another $20,000 for the specialized monitoring. If he needed a transplant, add another $250,000. Even with insurance, the out-of-pocket costs would bankrupt them within a year. Elena's parents, Giuseppe and Maria Rossi, were immigrants from a small village outside Naples. They had come to America 40 years ago with nothing but hope and determination. Giuseppe worked as a baker, eventually saving enough to open a tiny bakery in Boston's North End. It was not fancy, just good bread and pastries, the kind of place where neighborhood people came every morning. Maria worked beside him 16-hour days, 6 days a week. They had put 3 children through college by sheer force of will, working jobs that destroyed their bodies so their kids could have better lives. They had already remortgaged their home twice, once to help Elena's older sister pay for her wedding, once to cover their own mounting medical bills as age and hard work took their toll. There was no money left. The well was dry. The bakery barely broke even most months. They were drowning before Marco got sick. Now they were sinking. Elena made the only choice she could. She withdrew from Boston University 6 months before finishing her thesis, 6 months before she would have had her master's degree and entry into one of the most competitive fields in law enforcement. She took the first job that paid cash weekly, that did not require background checks or references or time to onboard. She became a waitress at Castello, the same restaurant where her father had worked as a dishwasher 30 years ago when the family first arrived in Boston, before he saved enough to open his bakery. The irony was not lost on Elena. She had spent her whole life climbing out of the working class, earning scholarships, studying until 3 in the morning, learning languages most people had never heard of. Also, she would never have to do the kind of back-breaking service work her parents did. And here she was, right back where her family started. Every paycheck, every tip, every dollar went into the Marco Fund. She lived in a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat in Dorchester, a neighborhood most of Castello's clientele would not drive through with their car doors locked. The apartment cost $800 a month, which was a steal for Boston, but only because it was 200 square feet, had no actual bedroom, just a Murphy bed that pulled down from the wall, and the hot water only worked about half the time. She ate the staff meal at work, usually pasta with whatever sauce the kitchen was using that night, and nothing else most days. She cancelled her phone plan and used free Wi-Fi. She walked everywhere to save subway fare. She stopped reading academic journals because the university library access she had lost when she withdrew. And seeing the research she used to be part of, the conferences her former classmates were attending, the careers they were building, hurt too much. It was easier to just not know. Easier to pretend that life had never existed. And tonight Vincent Moretti had walked through the heavy oak doors of Castello. "Rossi," Gerald hissed, suddenly appearing at her elbow like a nervous ghost. "VIP at table 1. The Moretti party. Do not screw this up. Do you understand me? These people, they can destroy this restaurant with one phone call. Smile. Be perfect. Do not speak unless spoken to." "Yes, Gerald," Elena said, smoothing her apron with shaking hands. Vincent Moretti. Everyone in Boston knew the name, even if they pretended not to. He was a businessman officially, the owner of Moretti Construction and Waste Management. Legitimate companies that had contracts with the Sickie, that employed hundreds of people, that looked clean on paper. Unofficially, everyone knew what he really was. The head of the Moretti crime family, one of the last old-school Italian mob operations still functioning in New England. He controlled the docks, which meant he controlled what came in and out of Boston by sea. He controlled the drug trade in 3 states. He controlled politicians through a combination of bribes and blackmail. He controlled the judges. He controlled the cops. He was a shadow king ruling an invisible empire built on fear and violence and money. He was 45 years old, handsome in a dangerous way, with salt and pepper hair swept back from a sharp, cruel face. He wore suits that cost more than Elena's yearly rent and had a reputation for 2 things: making people disappear without a trace and humiliating anyone he considered beneath him for entertainment. Elena approached table 1 with her notepad ready, her pen gripped tight, her expression carefully molded into the bland, pleasant mask she wore like armor. Vincent sat in the center of the round table like a king holding court, his posture relaxed and commanding, legs spread wide, one arm draped over the back of his chair. Flanked around him were 4 men, all in expensive dark suits that looked custom-tailored. To his right sat Anthony Costa, Vincent's underboss, a massive man who looked like he had been carved from granite. with scarred knuckles and cold, dead eyes that had certainly seen and done terrible things. To Vincent's left sat Marco Benedetti, the consigliere, thin and elegant with wire-rimmed glasses and an air of quiet intelligence that made him somehow more frightening than the muscle. Across from Vincent sat two younger men, probably mid-30s, soldiers in the organization trying too hard to look tough and important, wearing too much cologne and too many gold rings. "Good evening," Elena said, her voice soft and professionally pleasant. "Welcome to Costello. My name is Elena and I will be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink?" Vincent did not look up. He was examining the menu as if it had personally offended him, his brow furrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure. "Water," he said flatly, his voice carrying the trace of an accent, Brooklyn Italian mixed with something older underneath, sparkling. "San Pellegrino, not that cheap garbage. And make sure the glass is actually clean this time. Last time I was here, I could see fingerprints on the rim. It is disgusting. How hard is it to wash a glass properly?" "Of course, sir," Elena said, writing it down even though she would remember. She had trained herself to remember everything, every detail, every preference, because mistakes meant smaller tips and she could not afford smaller tips. She turned to the others at the table. "And for the rest of you gentlemen?" The men ordered quickly, their voices curred. "Bourbon neat, Scotch double, another sparkling water. A bottle of the Barolo, the 97 if you have it." Eleanor wrote it all down, her hand moving efficiently, her face giving away nothing even though her mind was calculating. The Barolo alone was $800. If they ordered food to match, this table could be a $3,000 check. 20% of that was $600. If she got even 15% after they inevitably undertipped because men like this always undertipped on principle, that was $450. That was half of Marco's medication cost for the week. That was groceries for her parents. That was a payment to keep the electricity on in the apartment. She returned 5 minutes later with the drinks arranged perfectly on a silver tray, each glass positioned exactly as it should be, no fingerprints, no smudges, no water drops. She placed them in front of each man with practiced precision, using her left hand to present and her right hand to steady the tray, never letting it wobble, never making a sound. Vincent picked up his San Pellegrino glass immediately, held it up to the candlelight from the table centerpiece, inspected it with the intensity of a jeweler examining a diamond, turning it slowly to catch every angle. He was making a show of it, making sure she knew he was watching for imperfections. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he set it down without drinking from it. "Acceptable," he said, the word dripping with condescension, as if he were a king granting mercy to a peasant. "Now for food. What do you recommend?" Elena had given this speech hundreds of times. "The ossobuco is exceptional tonight," she said. "The chef braises it for 6 hours until the meat falls off the bone. And the branzino is very fresh, flown in this morning from the Mediterranean. It is served whole with lemon and herbs. Both are excellent choices." Vincent finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, almost black, the kind of eyes that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. He looked at her name tag first, reading it slowly as if he were memorizing it. "Elena." Then his gaze dropped to her shoes, lingering on the worn canvas and the sole that was barely holding on. Then back up to her face, taking in her features with the slow, deliberate assessment of someone evaluating property. A slow, cruel smile spread across his lips, pulling at the corners of his mouth like a predator baring its teeth. "You," he said, his voice loud enough that nearby tables could hear, "look like you have never eaten osso buco in your entire life. Have you? Have you ever tasted something that costs more than your rent?" Elena felt heat rise up her neck, felt her face flush with humiliation, but she kept her expression neutral, kept her voice steady. "I have tried it, sir. It is very good." "Where?" Vincent laughed, a harsh barking sound that had no joy in it. "At the Olive Garden? Did they bring it out with unlimited breadsticks?" The men at the table erupted in laughter, loud and performative, eager to please their boss, to show they appreciated his wit. Anthony Costa slapped the table, making the silverware jump. Marco Benedetti smiled thinly, his eyes never leaving Elena's face, watching her reaction with clinical interest. The two younger soldiers laughed the hardest, nearly falling over themselves. Elena said nothing. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than defending yourself. Responding gave them more ammunition. Silence made you boring, and boring meant they moved on faster. Vincent leaned back in his chair, spreading his arms wide, claiming even more space, his body language screaming dominance. "You know what?" he said, looking around at his men. "I am in a very good mood tonight. We closed a big deal today. Very big. So let me have some fun. Let me test our little waitress here." He turned his attention back to Elena, his smile widening. "You work in an Italian restaurant. You should know Italian, no?" "Some phrases," Elena said carefully. "Enough to understand the menu." "Phrases," Vincent repeated mockingly. "Like buongiorno and grazie and where is the bathroom?" Very impressive. He leaned forward, his eyes glittering with malicious amusement. "Let me teach you something, Elena. Let me give you a real education." And then he switched languages entirely. He started speaking in rapid-fire Sicilian, not the standard Italian taught in schools or spoken in Rome or Florence, but a distinct regional dialect that was dying out. Used mainly by old-world mobsters from specific villages in Sicily and people whose families had maintained the old ways. His accent was thick, guttural, deliberately fast, the words running together in a way that would be incomprehensible to anyone not intimately familiar with this particular linguistic variation. He was showing off, demonstrating his cultural authenticity, his connection to the old country, his superiority over this American waitress who probably did not even know there were different kinds of Italian. Translation: listen very carefully, little girl. I want you to go back to that kitchen and tell the chef, if my veal is not cooked absolutely perfectly, if there is even one piece of gristle, even the slightest hint of being overcooked, I will personally make sure he never works in this city again. And bring me another bottle of wine, the expensive kind from the reserve list, not the cheap garbage they probably give to people like you when you drink at home, if you can even afford wine. Do you understand a single word I am saying, or are you just standing there with that stupid look on your face? You probably think I am asking for more water, do you not? This is pathetic. This is what happens when restaurants hire people who have no culture, no education, no breeding. You are serving food you could never afford to eat, and you do not even understand the language it comes from. It is like watching a monkey try to paint. He sat back, his smile triumphant, his arms crossed over his chest. He waited for the reaction he wanted, for her to stammer out an apology, to admit she did not understand, to look confused and lost so he could laugh at her again, so he could explain to his men in English what he said, so they could all enjoy the joke together. The other men were already smirking, already preparing to laugh, already enjoying her anticipated humiliation. The tables around them had gone quiet, sensing something happening, people pausing their conversations to watch without appearing to watch. Elena stood perfectly still. The sounds of the restaurant seemed to fade into background noise, the clinking of silverware and the murmur of other conversations becoming a distant hum. She felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest, something that had been dormant for 4 years suddenly waking up. She knew exactly what he said. She had not just understood it, she had identified the specific regional variation of Sicilian he was using, had placed his family's origin to within probably 20 miles based on his pronunciation patterns, his use of certain archaic terms, his particular rhythmic cadence. She had spent 2 full years in graduate school studying this exact thing, writing a thesis on linguistic markers in organized crime communications, learning to identify criminal affiliations and hierarchies based on dialect usage. This was her specialty. This was what she had sacrificed everything to become an expert in. She had 2 choices. She could play dumb, let him have his moment of superiority, collect her tip and go home, swallow the humiliation like she had swallowed 1,000 others. Or she could respond. Responding was dangerous. Responding would expose her, would reveal that she was not just a waitress, would change everything. But 4 years of biting her tongue, 4 years of being invisible, 4 years of watching men like Vincent Moretti treat people like garbage because they believed they were untouchable, suddenly felt like too much. She thought about her father, who had worked as a dishwasher in this very restaurant, who had been treated exactly like this, who had swallowed his pride every single day so his children could have better lives. She thought about Marco, lying in a hospital bed because she had to leave school. She thought about the thesis she never finished, the career she never started, the person she used to be. She looked directly at Vincent Moretti. She did not look away. She did not drop her eyes respectfully. She met his gaze with the full force of her intelligence, her education, her fury. She did not reach for her notepad. She did not stammer. She adjusted her posture, standing a little taller, her spine straightening, her chin lifting slightly. And when she spoke, her voice changed completely. Gone was the soft, subservient tone of the professional waitress. In its place was something else entirely, something sharp and precise and utterly devastating. She responded in Sicilian, but not the rough dialect Vincent had used. She spoke in the formal, aristocratic Sicilian of the old landowners, the educated class, the nobility, the kind of Sicilian that implied she was not just fluent but superior. Her pronunciation was flawless, each word articulated with a precision that made his attempt sound like a child playing pretend. Her grammar was perfect, using the formal cases and conditional tenses that most modern speakers had forgotten. She was not just speaking his language. She was speaking it better than he ever could. Translation: Signor Moretti, if you wish to insult me, I would suggest you do so in a language you actually speak with competence. Your Sicilian is, and I say this with all due respect, which is very little, atrocious. You sound like a fishmonger from the Palermo docks, which, based on your syntax and your particular misuse of the passato remoto tense, is almost certainly where your family originates from. Probably within 10 kilometers of the Vucciria market district. As for your request regarding the veal, I will inform Chef Salvatore of your preferences, though I assure you, threatening him is entirely unnecessary. He is Calabrian, not Sicilian, which means he actually knows how to cook and does not need instructions from someone whose grandmother probably learned her recipes from a street vendor. Shall I also bring you a dictionary, or would you prefer to continue embarrassing yourself in front of your associates who, I notice, are trying very hard not to laugh at you? The table went completely silent, utterly, totally, devastatingly silent. The silence spread outward like a shockwave, infecting nearby tables, people stopping mid-sentence to turn and look. Vincent's smile vanished from his face as if it had been surgically removed. His mouth fell open slightly. His face went pale, then red, then a dangerous shade of purple. The transformation took perhaps 3 seconds. Anthony Costa's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket, toward where Elena knew a gun was almost certainly holstered, his protective instincts kicking in even though the threat was just words. Marco Benedetti's eyes went wide behind his glasses, his mouth forming a small O of surprise, his analytical mind clearly racing to process what just happened. The 2 younger soldiers looked at each other in confusion, glancing between Vincent and Elena, their limited intelligence struggling to catch up. Vincent stared at her as if she had transformed into something incomprehensible, as if the waitress had suddenly revealed herself to be a completely different species. "You," he stammered, his usual smooth confidence completely shattered. "You speak Sicilian?" Where did you fluently?" Elena said, switching back to English with effortless ease. Along with standard Italian, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and conversational Arabic. I also read Latin and ancient Greek. Though I will admit my ancient Greek pronunciation is probably suspect since there are no native speakers left to correct me. Your threat regarding Chef Salvatore was duly noted but, as I mentioned, entirely unnecessary. Violence is not required for good service, merely basic human decency, which appears to be something you were never taught. Now, shall I repeat the evening specials, or would you prefer to continue testing my linguistic abilities? I should warn you, I have a graduate degree in forensic linguistics from Boston University, so this could take quite a while. Vincent's jaw clenched so hard Elena could see the muscles jumping in his cheek. A vein was throbbing in his temple. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by a waitress, especially not in front of his men. His entire persona, his authority, his power was built on fear and dominance, on the understanding that he was always the smartest, most dangerous person in any room. This woman had just stripped away that illusion using nothing but words, using his own weapon of choice against him with devastating effectiveness. "Who the hell are you?" Vincent asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I am your waitress," Elena said calmly, "and your veal will be out shortly. Would you like me to ask the sommelier to recommend a wine pairing, or shall I simply bring you something that matches your sophistication level? I am thinking perhaps a nice Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill. It comes in a bottle with a screw top. Very convenient." The younger soldiers made a choking sound, desperately trying not to laugh, their faces turning red from the effort. Even Anthony Costa's granite expression cracked slightly, one corner of his mouth twitching. Only Marco Benedetti maintained perfect composure, but his eyes were dancing with something that might have been admiration, or might have been fear, or might have been both. Elena turned on her heel, her server training kicking in, the movement smooth and professional, and walked away from the table with her head high, a notepad tucked under her arm. She did not hurry. She walked at a measured pace, every step deliberate, leaving Vincent Moretti drowning in his own humiliation while the ghost of her perfect, aristocratic Sicilian hung in the air like smoke. As she pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, the adrenaline that had been holding her upright suddenly vanished. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the stainless steel prep counter, her breath coming in short, jagged gasps, her hands shaking so violently that the notepad fell from her fingers and clattered onto the tile floor. What have I done, she thought. Oh God, what have I done? I just humiliated Vincent Moretti in front of his entire crew. I just embarrassed one of the most dangerous men in New England. I am going to be fired. I am going to lose this job. Marco's medication. The rent. My parents. Everything. Yo, what just happened out there? A voice asked. Carlos, the line cook, a huge bear of a man with tattooed arms and a kind smile, was looking at her with concern. You look like you saw a ghost. You okay, Elena? I think I just made a catastrophic mistake, Elena whispered, sliding down to sit on the floor, her back against the counter, her head in her hands. You talked back to a customer, Carlos guessed, setting down his knife. Not just any customer, Elena said, her voice muffled. Vincent Moretti. Carlos's eyes went dinner plate wide. The mob guy? Are you out of your mind? He will have Gerald fire you before dessert, or worse. Elena, that man makes people disappear. What did you say to him? I corrected his Sicilian, Elena said, and a hysterical laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep in her chest. I told him he sounded like a fishmonger and insulted his grandmother's cooking. Carlos stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he started laughing. A deep, belly-shaking laugh that made his whole body convulse. Girl, you are either the bravest person I have ever met or the stupidest. Maybe both. You know what, though? He has it coming. That man treats everyone like dirt. At least someone finally told him the truth. I am going to lose my job, Elena said, reality crashing down. Maybe, Carlos admitted. But at least you will lose it with dignity. That counts for something. Dignity does not pay for chemotherapy, Elena said quietly. What? My little brother. He has leukemia. That is why I am here. That is why I took this job. Every dollar I make goes to keeping him alive, and I just threw it all away to correct a mobster's grammar. She started crying, tears streaming down her face. What is wrong with me? Carlos crouched down beside her. Hey. Do not do that. Listen to me. You did not throw anything away. You stood up for yourself. That matters. And if Moretti gets you fired, screw this place. I will help you find another job. Half the restaurants in this city need servers. You speak like 6 languages. You will land on your feet. But not before Marco misses his treatments, Elena said. Not before my parents lose their bakery trying to help. Not before everything falls apart. Before Carlos could respond, the kitchen door swung open violently. Gerald Pierce stood there, his face pale, his hand shaking as he pointed at Elena. You, my office. Now. Elena stood up slowly, wiping her eyes, trying to compose herself. She followed Gerald through the kitchen, past the other staff who were trying not to stare, past Chef Salvatore, who gave her a small nod of what might have been respect, through the narrow hallway to Gerald's cramped office that smelled like old paper and desperation. Gerald closed the door and turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. Sit down, he said. Elena sat. Gerald paced back and forth, running his hands through his thinning hair. Do you have any idea, he said, his voice rising, what you just did? Do you have any concept of how bad this is? I apologize, Elena started. Vincent Moretti just called me personally, Gerald interrupted. Do you know what he said? Elena braced herself. That I should be fired, she guessed quietly. No, Gerald said, and something in his tone made Elena look up. He said, and I quote, I want that waitress at my table for the rest of the night. I want her to personally serve every course. And I want to speak with her privately before I leave. Elena's blood ran cold. That was worse. That was so much worse than being fired. Gerald was looking at her with something between pity and terror. I do not know what you did out there, he said. But Moretti does not make requests. He makes commands. You are going back to that table. You are going to serve them their dinner. You are going to smile. And when he asks to speak with you, you are going to listen. Do you understand? Do I have a choice? Elena asked. No, Gerald said. You do not. And Elena, whatever happens, whatever he says, just agree. Do not argue. Do not fight. Men like Vincent Moretti, they do not forget disrespect. If he is giving you a chance to make this right, take it. Your life might depend on it. Elena nodded numbly. She stood up, smoothed her apron, and walked back out into the dining room. She put in the order for table 1, making absolutely certain everything was perfect. The veal cooked exactly medium rare. The branzino whole and beautiful. The sides, the garnishes, everything arranged like art. She served each course personally, refilling drinks, clearing plates, maintaining perfect professional distance. Vincent and his men ate in relative silence, the earlier bravado gone, replaced by something else, a tension Elena could not quite identify. Vincent watched her the entire time, his dark eyes tracking her movements, but he did not speak. He did not make jokes. He just watched. Finally, after dessert and coffee, after the check had been settled, Gerald appeared at Elena's side. Mr. Moretti would like a word, he whispered. In the private dining room. Elena's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She followed Gerald through the restaurant, through a door she had never been through, into a small, elegant room with dark wood paneling and a single table. Vincent was standing by the window, looking out at the Boston street below, his hands clasped behind his back. Marco Benedetti stood in the corner, silent as a shadow. Leave us, Vincent said without turning around. Sir, Gerald started. I said leave, Vincent repeated. Gerald fled. The door clicked shut. Elena stood in the middle of the room, her hands clasped in front of her apron, trying to control her breathing. Long seconds passed. Finally, Vincent turned around. His face was calm, unreadable. He gestured to a chair. Sit, he said. Sir, I cannot sit with customers, Elena said automatically. It is against policy. I own this building, Vincent said flatly. I can make the policy. Sit. Elena sat. Her legs were shaking. Vincent did not sit. He walked slowly around the table, studying her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. Where did you learn Sicilian? He asked finally. Boston University, Elena said. I was in graduate school. Forensic linguistics program. Was, Vincent repeated. What happened? My brother got sick, Elena said. I had to leave school to pay for his treatment. And now you are a waitress, Vincent said. He said it without cruelty. He said it like he was putting pieces together. You have a graduate degree in forensic linguistics, which means you were probably training to work for law enforcement, analyzing criminal communications, testifying in court. And now you are serving me veal. That is quite a fall. It is what I have to do, Elena said simply. Family comes first. Vincent studied her for a long moment. You embarrassed me tonight, he said, in front of my men. In front of people who need to believe I am untouchable. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Yes, Elena said quietly. You should be terrified right now, Vincent continued. You should be begging for your life. I know, Elena said. But I am too tired to beg. Vincent smiled slightly, an odd expression. Respect, he said. That takes guts. Or stupidity, maybe both. He moved to the window again, looking out at the city. Let me tell you something about respect, Elena. In my world, respect is everything. It is currency. It is armor. It is the difference between life and death. When someone disrespects me, I crush them. I have to. Because if I do not, everyone thinks I am weak. And weak men in my business do not last. I understand, Elena said, wondering where this was going. But here is the interesting thing, Vincent continued, turning back to face her. You did not disrespect me out of malice. You did not insult me because you were trying to challenge my authority or because you wanted to hurt me. You did it because I tried to humiliate you first, and you defended yourself the only way you knew how. With intelligence, with skill, with something I did not expect. That, Elena, is not disrespectful. That is self-defense. And I can respect self-defense. Elena said nothing, not sure where this was going, but sensing it was not toward violence. Marco, Vincent said, not taking his eyes off Elena. What is your assessment? Marco Benedetti stepped out of the shadows. His voice was soft, measured. She understood our conversation before you tested her, he said. Before you switched to Sicilian. We were discussing the shipment, the delivery schedule, and the distribution routes. We were speaking in Sicilian because we assumed no one here would understand. But she understood. She heard everything. That makes her dangerous. Elena's stomach dropped. She had understood. Of course she had. They had been discussing a drug shipment, cocaine coming through the port. How they were going to move it through 3 states using legitimate waste management trucks. She had heard every word. She just had not thought they realized she heard. Is that true? Vincent asked. Did you understand our business discussion? Elena could lie. But lying to Vincent Moretti seemed like a faster death than telling the truth. Yes, she said quietly. I understood. And what are you going to do with that information? Vincent asked. Nothing, Elena said. I do not want anything to do with your business. I just want to keep my job and pay for my brother's treatment. Vincent nodded slowly. Here is my problem, Elena. You know things you should not know. You heard things you should not have heard. In my business, that is usually solved with a body and a concrete block. But you are also something I have not seen in a very long time. You are intelligent. You are skilled. You are desperate enough to be useful, but not greedy enough to be a problem. So I am going to make you an offer. Elena's heart sank. She knew what was coming. You work for me, Vincent said. Not full-time. A few hours a week. I do business with people from all over the world. Russians, Arabs, South Americans, Albanians. They all speak different languages, and they all think they are smarter than me because I only speak Italian and English. I need someone who can sit in on meetings, listen to what they are really saying, not just the words, but the meaning behind them. You are trained for that. Forensic linguistics. Analyzing language for deception, for intent, for hidden meanings. That is exactly what I need. I cannot do that, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. I left that world. I am just a waitress now. You are not just anything, Vincent said sharply. And here is the deal. You work for me maybe 5 or 6 hours a week. I pay you $10,000 a month, cash. No taxes. No questions. No paper trail. Elena's mind reeled. $10,000 a month. That was more than she made in 4 months at Castello, even with good tips. That was enough to cover Marco's treatments with money left over. That was enough to help her parents. That was enough to breathe, to sleep at night without calculating pennies, to stop choosing between electricity and groceries. But it was also blood money. It was working for a man who destroyed lives, who sold drugs that killed people, who represented everything she had once wanted to dedicate her career to stopping. It was betraying everything she believed in. What if I say no? Elena asked, even though she already knew the answer. Then you are a liability, Vincent said simply. And I do not leave liabilities walking around. You heard things tonight, Elena. Sensitive things. Things that could put me in prison for the rest of my life. I cannot let you walk out of here with that information unless I know you are loyal. And the only way I know you are loyal is if you work for me. If your livelihood depends on me. If you have skin in the game. So I do not actually have a choice, Elena said. Everyone has a choice, Vincent said. But some choices are easier to live with than others. You can say no and I will make your death quick and painless. Or you can say yes and your brother lives, your parents keep their bakery, and you get to sleep in a bed that does not have cockroaches. What is it going to be? Elena closed her eyes. She saw Marco's face, pale and gaunt from the chemotherapy, his smile when she visited, his determination to beat the cancer. She saw her mother's hands, gnarled from decades of kneading dough, shaking as she tried to count money for bills. She saw her father's back, bent from years of carrying flour sacks, the way he walked slower now, the pain he tried to hide. She saw the thesis she never finished, the FBI badge she would never earn, the life she had sacrificed. She opened her eyes and looked at Vincent Moretti. "Fine," she said. "I will do it. But I have conditions." Vincent's eyebrow raised slightly. "I am listening." "I do not hurt anyone," Elena said, her voice stronger now. "I translate. I analyze. That is all. I do not participate in violence. I do not help you hurt people." "Agreed," Vincent said. "I get paid weekly," Elena continued. "Not monthly. Every Friday. Cash. And if anything happens to my brother, if his treatments are interrupted, if my family is threatened in any way, I go to the FBI with everything I know, and I do not care what you do to me afterward." Vincent studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a genuine smile this time, not the cruel sneer from the dining room. "You have courage, Eleanor Rossi. I respect that. Fine. Every Friday. Cash. Your family stays safe. But understand this. If you betray me, if you ever go to the FBI or anyone else, I will not kill you. I will kill everyone you love. I will start with your brother in his hospital bed, then your parents, then every person you have ever cared about, and I will make you watch before I kill you last. Do we have an understanding?" Elena felt like she was signing away her soul, felt the weight of damnation settling on her shoulders. But she nodded. "We have an understanding." "Good," Vincent said. He extended his hand across the table. "Welcome to the family, Eleanor Rossi." Elena reached out slowly and shook his hand. His grip was firm, dry, terrifying in its normalcy. She was shaking hands with the devil, and they both knew it. "You start Monday," Vincent said, releasing her hand. "Marco will give you the address. Wear something comfortable. We have a meeting with our Russian associates, and I need to know if they are planning to screw me over." He paused, then added almost gently, "And Elena, for what it is worth, I am sorry about your brother. Cancer is a bastard. My mother died from it. I hope your brother beats it." The unexpected humanity in his voice almost broke her. "Thank you," Elena whispered. Vincent nodded to Marco, who opened the door. Elena stood on shaking legs and walked out through the private dining room, through the restaurant where the late dinner crowd was still eating, oblivious to the fact that one of their servers had just sold her soul. She retrieved her coat from the back, ignored Gerald's questions about what happened, and walked out into the cold Boston night. She made it 3 blocks before she stopped in an alley and vomited, her body rejecting what her mind had just accepted. When there was nothing left, she sat on the cold concrete, her back against the brick wall, and cried until her throat was raw. But even as she cried, even as she hated herself, a small part of her brain, the part trained in forensic analysis, was already working. Vincent Moretti had just made a critical mistake. He had assumed that because she was desperate, she would be loyal. He had assumed that money would buy her silence. He had assumed that fear would keep her in line. He was wrong. Eleanor Rossi had not forgotten who she was or what she believed in. She had not forgotten that 4 years ago she was training to take down people exactly like Vincent Moretti. And now, trapped in his world, working for him, she had access to something law enforcement would kill for. Inside information. Direct access to his operations. The ability to document everything from the inside. She was going to take the job. She was going to take his money and save her brother. But she was also going to build the case that would destroy him. It would take time. It would take patience. It would be the most dangerous thing she had ever done. But Elena had not spent 6 years studying criminal linguistics, learning to analyze deception, understanding how criminal organizations communicated, for nothing. Vincent Moretti thought he had just recruited a translator. He had actually just invited a federal informant into his inner circle. The war had just begun. Where are you right now? Are you understanding the gravity of what Elena just did? Because this is where the story really starts. This is where a brilliant woman trapped by circumstance becomes the most dangerous weapon Vincent Moretti never saw coming. If you are feeling this, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you would do in Elena's position. Because what comes next is going to test every ounce of courage she has. For the next 8 months, Eleanor Rossi lived a double life that would have destroyed most people. During the day, she continued working at Costello, serving pasta and pouring wine, maintaining her cover as just another struggling waitress. But 3 evenings a week, sometimes 4, she would take the subway to Southie, to a nondescript office building that Vincent owned, and she would sit in on meetings. The meetings were everything she expected and worse. She met Russian mobsters negotiating weapons deals, their conversations in Russian peppered with threats that sounded almost poetic in their violence. She met Colombian cartel representatives discussing cocaine shipments, their Spanish laced with agricultural metaphors that were actually code for distribution routes. She met Chinese triad members negotiating protection rackets, their Mandarin so formal and polite that it took Elena 3 meetings to realize they were discussing murder. She met Albanian smugglers, Arab money launderers, Irish gun runners. The United Nations of crime all flowing through Vincent Moretti's empire. And Elena translated everything. She sat quietly in the corner with a notepad, her expression blank and professional, and she told Vincent exactly what was being said. The literal translations, yes, but more importantly, the subtext. When the Russian said the shipment would arrive on schedule, Elena told Vincent the man's use of the perfective aspect suggested doubt that he was likely lying. When the Colombian used the diminutive form for the delivery amount, Elena explained it was a negotiating tactic, that he actually had more product than he was admitting. When the Chinese representative used an overly formal register to discuss payment, Elena warned Vincent it was a sign of disrespect, that they were planning to cheat him. Vincent came to rely on her completely. Within 2 months, she was in every major meeting. Within 4 months, she had her own office in the building. Within 6 months, Vincent was asking her opinion on deals, trusting her judgment, treating her almost like a consigliere. And the entire time, Elena was writing everything down. She kept a journal written in a code she developed herself, a combination of linguistic symbols and shorthand that would look like academic notes to anyone who found it. Every name mentioned, every date specified, every location discussed, every crime planned. She documented Vincent's entire operation with the precision of a scientist cataloging a new species. She also started recording conversations. Marco Benedetti had given her a company phone, a burner that was supposed to be secure. What he did not know was that Elena had rooted the operating system and installed recording software that activated automatically whenever she was in the office. Every meeting was captured. Every phone call Vincent made in her presence. Every casual conversation between crew members. Hours and hours of evidence. But Elena knew documentation was not enough. She needed a way to get this information to law enforcement without getting herself or her family killed. That was the impossible equation. If she went to the FBI now, Vincent would know immediately. He had cops on his payroll, federal agents who tipped him off to investigations. The moment she walked into an FBI office, someone would call Vincent and Elena would disappear. She needed a different approach. She needed someone she could trust absolutely, someone outside the system, someone Vincent's network could not touch. It took her 3 months to find him. His name was David Chen. He had been her classmate at Boston University, 1 year ahead of her in the forensic linguistics program. While Elena had dropped out, David had finished, had been recruited by the FBI, and now worked in the Boston field office specializing in organized crime. But more importantly, David was not part of the old boys network. He was young, idealistic, and he had always operated outside the political machinery that made agents vulnerable to corruption. Elena contacted him through an encrypted email service, using an account she created at a public library, making sure there was no digital trail back to her. She did not explain everything, just asked if they could meet to discuss a hypothetical situation, purely academic, nothing official. They met at a coffee shop in Cambridge, far from Boston's North End, far from anywhere Vincent's people operated. David was 32 now, wearing a suit that did not quite fit, looking tired in the way all FBI agents look tired. Elena, he said, had genuine warmth in his voice. It has been forever. I heard you left the program. Family emergency? My brother got sick, Elena said. I had to find work. I am sorry, David said. How is he doing? Better, Elena said. The treatments are working. Look, David, I need to ask you something. Completely off the record, hypothetically. David's expression shifted, the friendly classmate disappearing, the federal agent emerging. Hypothetically, he repeated carefully. If someone had information about organized crime, Elena said slowly. Detailed information. Names, dates, recordings. But that person was in danger, and their family was in danger, and going through normal channels might get them killed. What would be the safest way to handle that? David was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming on his coffee cup. How detailed is this hypothetical information? Detailed enough to dismantle an entire operation, Elena said. RICO charges. Multiple federal violations. Enough to put people away for life. And the source, David asked. How did this hypothetical person get access to this information? They work for the organization, Elena said. Involuntarily. David sat back, processing. This is not hypothetical, is it? No, Elena admitted quietly. It is not. Are you in immediate danger? David asked, his voice sharp with concern. Not yet, Elena said. But I will be if the wrong people find out what I am doing. David, I need to know. Is there a way to do this safely? Is there a way to bring down Vincent Moretti without getting my entire family killed? David's eyes widened. Moretti. Elena, Jesus Christ. You are working for Vincent Moretti. Not by choice, Elena said. He forced me. I overheard something I should not have. He gave me a choice between working for him or dying. I chose to live, but I also chose to destroy him. I just need help doing it. David ran his hands through his hair, the gesture so familiar from their study sessions years ago. Okay, let me think. He was quiet for several minutes, his analytical mind working through possibilities. Here is the problem. Moretti owns people. Cops, agents, prosecutors. If we start an official investigation, someone will tip him off. But there is a way around that. Tell me, Elena said. There is a joint task force, David explained. FBI, State Police. It is run out of Washington, not Boston. Completely compartmentalized. Nobody in the Boston office knows who is on it or what they are working on. It was set up specifically to avoid leaks. If we can get your information to them, bypass the local field office entirely, Moretti would not find out until it was too late. Can you do that? Elena asked. Can you get information to this task force without going through official channels? Maybe, David said. I have a contact in D.C. Someone I trust. But Elena, you need to understand what you are asking. If you do this, you become a federal witness. Your life changes completely. Witness protection, new identity, leaving Boston forever. Your family too. Everyone you know gone. Is that something you are prepared for? Elena thought about Marco, finally in remission after a year of brutal treatment, smiling again, talking about going back to school. She thought about her parents, aging but finally able to relax a little, the bakery doing better now that they were not drowning in medical debt. She thought about the person she used to be, the career she had sacrificed, the justice she had always believed in. Yes, Elena said. I am prepared for that. But I need guarantees. My brother's medical care continues. My parents are protected. And I want to be part of taking Moretti down. I want to testify. I want him to know it was me. David nodded slowly. I will make contact. But Elena, this is going to take time. Months, maybe longer. You have to keep playing your role. You have to keep working for him. Can you do that? I have been doing it for 8 months, Elena said. I can do it for as long as it takes. Over the next 4 months, Elena continued her work for Vincent while secretly building the case against him. She met with David once a month, always in different locations, always careful, always watching for tails. She passed him flash drives full of recordings, copies of her coded journal, names and addresses and bank account numbers. David passed everything to his contact in Washington, a woman named Agent Sarah Williams, who ran the Joint Task Force. The task force was meticulous. They verified every piece of information Elena provided, cross-referenced it with their own intelligence, built a case so airtight that no corrupt lawyer could crack it. They identified every cop and agent on Vincent's payroll, made sure those people were excluded from the operation. They planned simultaneous raids on 12 locations, coordinated down to the minute, designed to happen so fast Vincent would not have time to warn anyone or destroy evidence. But building a case that big required time. And time meant Elena had to keep going deeper into Vincent's world, earning more of his trust, becoming more essential. It meant sitting in meetings where murders were planned. It meant translating conversations about people who would die because of the information she helped facilitate. It meant her hands were no longer clean. She was complicit now, even if her ultimate goal was justice. That weight sat on her soul like concrete. One night, after a particularly brutal meeting where Vincent had ordered a hit on a rival drug dealer who had shorted him on a payment, Elena sat in her tiny apartment and cried. The dealer was probably a bad person, probably deserved prison. But he did not deserve death, did not deserve to be found in the trunk of a car with 2 bullets in his head. Elena had been in the room when the order was given. She had translated the Russian enforcer's confirmation that the job would be done. She was a murderer by proxy. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. Package delivered. Timeline moved up. We will go in 2 weeks. Hang on. 2 weeks. 14 days. Elena could survive 14 more days. But Vincent was getting suspicious. It started small. Questions about where she was on her days off. Comments about how she seemed distracted. Marco Benedetti watched her more carefully during meetings, his analytical eyes missing nothing. Then one night Vincent called her into his office after everyone else had left. Sit, he said. His tone was different. Not friendly. Not warm. Cold. Elena sat, her heart pounding. I have been thinking, Vincent said, leaning back in his chair. You have been working for me for a year now. You have never asked for more money. Never complained. Never pushed back. You just do your job and take your cash and leave. Why is that? Because I am grateful for the opportunity, Elena said carefully. The money has helped my family tremendously. Grateful, Vincent repeated. He stood up, walked to the window. Let me tell you something, Elena. In my experience, nobody is that grateful. Nobody works for a criminal organization for a year and never tries to leverage their position. Never ask for favors. Never get greedy. It makes me wonder what you are really after. I do not understand, Elena said, even though ice was forming in her stomach. Vincent turned to face her. I had some people do some checking. Quiet checking. Nothing official. Just some questions asked to some people who know things. And you know what they found? What? Elena asked, her voice barely working. You had coffee with an old college friend 3 months ago, Vincent said. David Chen. He works for the FBI. Organized Crime Division. The world stopped. Elena's brain went into overdrive, trying to find an explanation, an excuse, anything. He is an old friend, she said. We were classmates. We occasionally catch up. In Cambridge, Vincent said. At a coffee shop far from your neighborhood. Far from anywhere you normally go. Why Cambridge, Elena? It was convenient for both of us, Elena said. He was visiting a case in the area. Was he, Vincent asked. Because I had someone check. There were no active FBI cases in Cambridge that week. So why were you really meeting with a federal agent, Elena? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Elena had seconds to make a choice. Lie and hope he believed her. Or tell the truth and hope she survived long enough for the raid to happen. Before she could answer, the door opened. Marco Benedetti walked in, holding a folder. Boss, he said quietly. We have a problem. Not now, Marco, Vincent snapped. It is about her, Marco said, nodding at Elena. You need to see this. Vincent took the folder. I opened it. His face went white, then red, then a shade of purple Elena had never seen before. Inside were surveillance photos. Elena meeting David Chen. Elena at the public library using computers. Elena mailing packages from a post office in Quincy. You have been building a case against me, Vincent said, his voice deadly quiet. This whole time. Taking my money. Sitting in my meetings. And feeding everything to the FBI. Elena did not deny it. There was no point. She looked Vincent Moretti in the eye and said the words she had been holding back for a year. Yes, I have. And in about 5 days, a joint task force is going to raid every location you own simultaneously and arrest everyone in your organization, including you. You are done, Vincent. Vincent moved so fast Elena did not see it coming. His hand wrapped around her throat, slamming her back against the wall, his face inches from hers. You little bitch, he snarled. I gave you everything. I saved your brother's life. And this is how you repay me? You did not save my brother, Elena choked out. You used him as leverage. You are a criminal and you hurt people and you need to be stopped. Vincent's grip tightened. I am going to kill you slowly, he whispered. But first I am going to kill your brother, then your parents, then everyone you have ever loved. And I am going to make you watch. The door burst open. Anthony Costa and 2 soldiers rushed in, guns drawn. Boss, we have federal agents outside, Anthony said. They are surrounding the building. What? Vincent said, releasing Elena, who collapsed to the floor, gasping. It is a raid, Marco said, looking at his phone. I am getting reports from all our locations. They are hitting everything simultaneously. That is impossible, Vincent said. The raid is not supposed to happen for 5 more days. Elena smiled through the pain in her throat. I lied, she rasped. I told you 5 days so you would not run. The raid was always tonight. And you are trapped. The sound of battering rams hitting doors echoed through the building. Voices shouting FBI, hands up. Gunfire somewhere below. We need to move, boss, Anthony said. Now. Vincent looked at Elena with pure hatred. Kill her, he ordered. Anthony raised his gun. And then the office door exploded inward. Federal agents poured in, tactical gear, rifles raised. David Chen was with them. Drop the weapon, he shouted. Vincent Moretti, you are under arrest. What followed was chaos. Vincent and his men were swarmed, handcuffed, dragged out. Elena was pulled to her feet by a female agent who wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. You okay? The agent asked. Elena nodded, unable to speak, watching as Vincent Moretti was led away in handcuffs, screaming threats that would never be carried out. David approached her. You did it, he said quietly. It is over. Is my family safe? Elena asked, her voice raw. Protective custody, David confirmed. We picked them up an hour ago. They are safe. Marco knows you are a hero. Your parents are confused but safe. And you are going to testify, and then you are going to disappear into witness protection and live a long, boring, safe life. Elena started laughing. It hurt her bruised throat, but she could not stop. A year of fear, of danger, of living 2 lives was finally over. She had done it. She had taken down Vincent Moretti using nothing but her intelligence and her courage. 6 months later, Eleanor Rossi stood in a federal courtroom in Boston. She was wearing a simple suit, her hair pulled back, her face calm. Across the room, Vincent Moretti sat at the defense table surrounded by lawyers, his eyes locked on her with undiluted hatred. The prosecutor called Elena to the stand. She swore to tell the truth. And for 8 hours over 2 days she testified. She explained how she had been forced to work for Vincent. She detailed every crime she witnessed. She authenticated the recordings, the documents, the evidence that painted a complete picture of his criminal empire. She spoke in clear, precise language, using her linguistic training to leave no room for doubt or interpretation. The defense tried desperately to discredit her. They called her a liar, a scorned employee, someone with an axe to grind. But the evidence did not lie. The recordings were authentic. The documents were real. Vincent's own voice condemning himself over and over. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous on all 73 counts. Guilty. Vincent Moretti was sentenced to life in federal prison without possibility of parole. 32 members of his organization received similar sentences. His empire, built over 25 years, was dismantled in a single day. As Vincent was led out of the courtroom, he looked at Elena one last time. He mouthed 2 words. You're dead. But Elena did not flinch. She'd heard that threat before. It meant nothing now. Vincent Moretti was going to die in a cell. And Elena was going to live. She did live. Under a new name in a new city, with her family safe and her brother healthy. She returned to school, finished her degree, and eventually joined the FBI as a forensic linguist. She spent the next decade using her skills to take down people like Vincent. Analyzing criminal communications, testifying in dozens of cases, becoming one of the Bureau's most valuable assets. But she never forgot where she came from. Never forgot the year she spent as a waitress, dismissed and invisible, using that invisibility as a weapon. Never forgot that the most powerful tool she had was not a gun or a badge. It was language. It was intelligence. It was the ability to see through lies and find truth. And that is how a waitress who spoke 6 languages brought down a mafia boss using nothing but words. This is a reminder that power does not come from money or violence. It comes from intelligence, from courage, from knowing when to speak and knowing what to say. Vincent Moretti learned the hard way that you should never underestimate someone based on their job, their appearance, or their circumstances. Because the person serving your dinner might just be the one who destroys your empire. If this story gave you chills, if it reminded you that knowledge is power, that patience is a weapon, that the quietest people are often the most dangerous, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have done in Elena's position. Would you have taken the risk? Would you have fought back? Hit that like button if you believe in justice, if you believe that people who hurt others eventually pay the price, if you believe that one person with courage can change everything. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded they are stronger than they think, someone who feels powerless, someone who needs to know that intelligence and determination can defeat any enemy. And subscribe with notifications turned on, because we have more stories coming that will show you exactly what happens when arrogance meets intelligence, when power meets principle, when bullies meet someone who refuses to be bullied. This is Best Heart Stories, where every story proves that true power is not about how much money you have or how many people fear you. It is about character. It is about courage. It is about using your mind as a weapon when you have nothing else. Eleanor Rossi started as a woman forced into an impossible situation, serving a man who thought she was nothing. She ended as the woman who dismantled his empire from the inside using the very skills he thought made her useful. She turned his own weapon, language, against him with devastating precision. Never underestimate a quiet woman. Never assume someone in a uniform cannot change the world. And never, ever speak freely in front of someone you have dismissed as insignificant. Because that person might be recording every word, building a case, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Vincent Moretti made that mistake, and it cost him everything. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. You are stronger than anyone who ever tried to make you feel small. Remember that. I will see you in the next story. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually crafted to deliver powerful lessons about courage, intelligence, and justice. Every story we tell is designed to remind you of your own strength.